Glad to see everybody back. We've got a large group today, and that's some first meeting of the year. As what we've done typically, let's go around the room and just introduce yourself and what company you're with. Start with you.
I'm Steve Deputy, I'm with Kemper Insurance.
Bill Davis, Industrial Literature. Steve Walton, Industrial Literature. Scott Hansen, Building Sprinkler at Sioux Falls.
Roy Lee, General Sprinkler.
Carol Wilson, Global Lift and Top.
Lauren Anderson with Summit Fire.
Marilyn Weber, Guardian Fire.
Chris Jensen with Nardi Fire. John Bernelson with Crane Engineering and Project Services.
Barbara Joy with Simplex Trail.
Robert King with Credit Corporation. Greg Buss, Global Risk Consulting.
Dave Montgomery, National Fire.
Kevin, Wilson Fire Protection.
James York, State Fire Marshal Division.
John Hoppy, Fire Protection.
Don Merrill, 3M.
Steve Moore, Chuck Lear.
David Holey with Newman Companies. Dave Hewitt with Response Fire Protection. Ron Peel, Response Fire Protection. Jim Brown, Response Fire Protection.
Tom Miller, Simplex Canal. Tommy Attell, Chuck Lear. Respnsbl, Online. Stuart Hammond, FM Global. Nick Kane, Global Risk.
Jim Brunetti with Tyco Fire Products.
Jeff Sutton, FM Global.
Doug Rivers, 3M Company.
Doug Mitchell with Simplex Canal.
Ryan Beerworth with Multistar.
Kevin Opitz, Simplex Grinnell.
Jake McGee with ADT.
And Don Vandenberg, ABC.
Jerome Petrosky, Alberta Engineering.
I'm Scott Landy with J and Johnson Fire Protection.
Michael Winnicke, General Sprinkler.
Bill Cook, Building Sprinkler.
Thank you very much. I'm Al Moore with Chuck Lear. As far as the board members this year, staying with the same group, we're in the second year of our term, so Warren Anderson is our vice president again, and Ken Strand is our treasurer. Scott Newland is taking over for Mark Connor as program chairman.
Scott Landy.
Landy, what did I say? Sorry about that. And Scott Futrell is on the Governor's Council liaison. With Phil Walker as the alternate, and I'm acting as president. So thank you for coming. Just to start the meeting in light of what's happened in New York over the last couple of weeks, I thought it prudent to mention that not only the firefighters that lost their lives there locally, of course, but also Aon Risk Services and Marshall McLennan had fairly large offices, had several floors in the World Trade Centers as well. So you might be thinking about them in your thoughts and prayers as well. Ken, are you in here? You must be out. We'll catch him later. As far as announcements go, I wanted to talk a little bit about the upcoming NFPA convention. This year, what they call the NFPA World Safety Conference and Exposition is going to be held here in Minneapolis in May. And as part of that, our chapter has a lot of things to participate in and responsibilities that go along with that. And we're trying to get a committee together, or would like volunteers to come on a committee to help organize that. There's several events that happen as a part of the Society of Fire Protection Engineers at the NFPA convention. There's an annual membership meeting. There's a what they call the Senate meeting, which is basically the chapter presidents from around the country get together and talk about ways to improve their chapters. There's also a chapter breakfast that we're directly responsible for. NFPA provides the room, but other than that, we need to put together the meal and we sell tickets for it, and we'd like to get some corporate sponsors for it and things like that. There's a raffle that goes on. Last year they raffled away a Franklin Mint fire truck. It's been fairly successful at raising money. There's also an SFPE booth in the exposition hall that needs to be manned. So there's, along with the national group, we don't do all these things alone, but the national group helps us quite a bit. Bill Hoppy with Harris Fire is met with us a couple of times and is kind of helping kick that off. But what we'd like to do is solicit any of you that are interested in helping out on that to get a hold of any of the board members or Bill Hoppy, and we'll get started on that because May's going to come up sooner than we think, I'm afraid. Let's see what else we got. Ken, you want to give a quick treasurer's report?
A brief one, like I usually do. We have $2,537 in our account. And we had a lot of people join as members tonight, and we appreciate that. And we're hopefully going to try and bring in some speakers from out east, or people that are, I don't know how to put it, some of the larger engineering firms or well-known people. So, thanks for the memberships.
Thanks, Ken. The other thing is we raised the membership dues, as you probably noticed last year. We hope to hold them steady here for a while. We didn't raise them this year. We've also had a request from the National Society of Fire Protection Engineers office to write or help write exam questions for fire protection professional engineering exams. And what they're looking for is 5 volunteers, and volunteers need to be registered fire protection engineers to help write these exam questions. And it's more like a classroom setting, as I understand it. They have somebody come from the national, get together with our group, and help us actually write the questions because they're fairly specific about how they get done. So if there's anybody that is interested in that, please let me know. We need to respond back to them as to whether we're able to help them on that. Of course, it directly impacts the exam for our state. And part of the reason that this is going on is because there's been some talk in the national professional engineering group that they want to do away with what they call Class 2 exams, which includes things like fire protection engineering and some of the more lesser known engineering curriculums. So we're trying to fight that and keep registration in fire protection engineering, but one of the main complaints is that they don't have enough exam questions, and of course the cost to monitor and write a separate exam. So again, if anybody can help us out in writing the questions, please let me know. Dave, you had mentioned that you had something you could add from the fire marshals?
Also that the advisory code committee finished up with the final edits yesterday, and it's on Tom Brace's state fire marshal's desk right now, and we're looking to get it signed and get it adopted and start enforcing it once law is voted too.
Okay, thanks, Dave. We don't have a report from the Governor's Council tonight, and so with that, I'll introduce our speaker. Jim Brunetti is the international manager, international training manager for Tyco Fire Products. He's been here before, and I'm sure some of you know him. And he plans to talk about the sprinkler recall, which, based on the number of people that are here, there seems to be quite a bit of interest. So please help me in welcoming Jim Brunetti.
Can everybody see the screen? Good. Does in the back? Okay, I normally don't get but in fact I'm not now either, so. You can't hear me, just yell at me. I have a feeling that's going to happen anyway. Before I get into the topics that we're going to get into, I did want to share, I travel all the time. The day before yesterday I was in New York City, and it truly is as bad as what the TVs are saying, and it's something that we should think about. It's not a 1 week or 2 week or a 1 month story. New York, that part of New York is absolutely devastating. As far as we could get was essentially where City Hall is and Broadway, which that's a good 3/4 of a mile to the water, and that entire area is still not even open to pedestrian traffic. Only emergency workers can get there, yet all the stores that are outside of that area are still closed. Stores, businesses, offices, residences. And one of the things that impacted me quite a bit was, literally 6 blocks away from ground zero, the buildings are completely covered with ash and dust, and they're still left as they were. I mean, wares in the windows in the stores, most of the windows are gone, but the wares are covered with the stuff too. So it's quite a bit of devastation, and it's going to take us a while to get through all that. Traveling hasn't seemed to be that big of a problem for me. This is my 4th trip since September 11th, and I truly do hope that our security does get jacked up, kind of like overseas they do. As I mentioned at dinner, that's still a little bit too easy. I mean, it took me minutes to go from my from the parking garage to the waiting area. So I think it can be increased a little bit. So now let's move on to the topic today. I don't want to take up all your night. The thing I want to talk about today is a couple of things. First and foremost is issues with our industry, specifically mine, the fire sprinkler industry, about replacing of sprinklers, why we have to go through this, why we're doing this, as well as changes in the FDA that I think is going to impact everybody here greatly. What we're finding, one of the things, since I've been involved with Tyco for a little over 2 years now, and with Central since 1994, seen a lot of cool things and quite a few things that have been problematic, going back to the Omega sprinkler, and of course now with the O-ring type sprinkler. I'm going to try to talk us through that a little bit so you feel comfortable with where we're at on this thing, and then move on into some changes, probable changes for the way we install some sprinklers in certain areas, because there's been some pretty dramatic stuff going on. Okay, the thing that you've been hearing about is the O-ring, or what Central caused, and I work for Tyco Fire, which is quite a few manufacturers for fire sprinklers. Star Sprinkler, Gem Sprinkler, and Central Sprinkler, as well as some other companies. So we are going to be talking about quite a scope, quite a lot of things here. And it's not limited to purely Central. All right. We're also going to eliminate some other potential problems with the other brands that we have. We can do one fell swoop, so to speak. But keying in on the issue that everybody is interested in is the O-ring issue. Now, the O-ring type sprinkler, not an Omega sprinkler, okay? That was another type of O-ring. This is another problem, and exponentially much greater, because there's so many more of them. I'll get into a little bit. But the O-ring sprinklers, we've been making them since essentially the mid-'70s. And have lots of them out there. Just about every sprinkler that was manufactured from Central, from the early 90s to 1999 were O-ring type sprinklers. Very few exceptions. We've had some reports of sprinklers not operating in a fire. Okay, these are not, again, omega issues. These are strictly going to O-ring type sprinklers. I'll show you what I mean by that. Very few with the standard types of O-rings, but we're seeing lots and lots of problems with the dry sprinklers. Those O-ring type sprinklers are actually physically in a different space than you'll see in traditional sprinklers. Like if you look up and see these sprinklers here, I'm talking about the seat. And the dry sprinklers, we're looking at where the sprinkler actually connects into the outlet or fitting. Right? And potential problems can happen with these types of sprinklers. We've lumped it all into one big group. Based on this history of some non-operations in a fire, big, huge investigations went on for quite a while. We've been aware about this for quite a while. We stopped making traditional O-ring type sprinklers almost a couple of years ago. And the scope got even bigger and bigger. Everybody's been involved with this. For right now, Central Sprinkler, UL, Factory Mutual, and the CPSC has all launched different investigations. And what we've done is formed a partnership or became an ally with the Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC. What Central got in a little trouble with back in the Omega days was starting and stopping and coming up with, we're going to try this, we're going to come up with a remedy, we're going to put springs on them, we're going to do all these different things. I had to go out and explain all those things at each phase. Right, and this time around, it's like, all right, if there's a potential problem, nip it in the bud and just deal with it as is. So working with the CPSC, we've come up with this program. This program we implemented in mid-July, and let me go through the different things here. I'm going to show you some pictures of O-rings, really simple, really basic, and you can kind of see where issues came up. Now, what I don't want to do is get a big, huge deal about, well, what about, bad water, and what about, oil and systems and all that kind of stuff that is normal in a fire sprinkler system. Frankly, I'm not concerned with that stuff. If you have a problem with the sprinklers that are in the air, they should come out. And what we have found is not just these non-operations, but we've seen some testing, right, where a portion, not all, not half, but a portion of the sprinklers actually can get somewhat like deposits or buildup or whatever, for whatever reason, and cause that seat to stick, right? So even if it could operate in a fire or would operate in a fire, it would need more than what is mandated for testing. And there's different rules on testing. You have a brand new sprinkler that comes out of the box at Underwriters Laboratory. We use them for an example. That sprinkler has to operate at 5 psi, right? Per NFPA, when you test a sprinkler, that sprinkler has a minimum operating pressure of 7 psi. So you got to fall within those guidelines when you take a look at it. If any sprinkler, when you test, operates at 8 psi, regardless of how much pressure is required for that sprinkler. You know what I mean? I mean, extended coverage, you may need 20 psi to operate the sprinkler. Doesn't matter. If it physically does not operate at that, that's considered a failure to operate per whatever testing criteria you happen to be using. Can you guys all see this a little bit? There's the different types of seating assemblies. And when I say basic, sorry, I lost my screen here. Well, I can see mine. Just envision it. Good, now we can vote. Here's the type of seat that's been used for years and years and years. It's traditionally with a solder type element. It could be a link, it could be a strut, what have you. And it's just basically a copper gasket or a metallic seat going directly against the frame of the sprinkler. I'm not going to get into all the different styles of it, but that's what we've seen for years and years. it became a lot more feasible, economical, and easier to manufacture going with the glass bulb type sprinkler. So that needed a new type of seat. All right. There's been a number of different ones. There's this one here. It's called a Belleville seal. And what that is simply just taking a special type of seat that can accommodate a glass bulb and also applying the same concept as the old copper type seat. All right. You end up with metal to metal. Now, the Belleville seals, and that's what just about every manufacturer out there is using now, all right, is just metal on metal. It's a cone type thing that crushes into that seat assembly, and it's coated with a very thin layer of Teflon. That's just to keep the integrity of the seat. The problems that we've run into is, again, the O-ring. Before, with Omegas, you had issues with too far into it. Well, we've also come up with some issues in here where this O-ring, which Central manufactured, this is their typical design, called a radial O-ring, where there's a groove in the seat assembly. This little, some people call it a cap, call it a seat. This has to come out based on water pressure and a fire. Once your element is gone, nothing should hold that seat assembly in there. All right. The O-rings, ironically, are there to prevent any leaks. Well, what has happened is through multiple different things, and there's 100 different stories or 100 different specific applications. But you could get a little bit of buildup, let's say in that area. All right, and since it's rubber, right, just plain old, in this case it's just a silicone rubber O-ring. With that buildup, let's say a salt deposit or whatever, can leach onto that rubber and cause it to stick a little bit. All right. Therefore, that's where you run into your problem. The other type of O-rings is something that's also used in the industry. This graphic is from the AFSA website to make this a little bit clearer. But this is called a crush O-ring. Similar to the annular, except it's not encircled by a groove. You push the seat on top of that O-ring in there. All right? Okay, it's not something that Central manufactures, but it's still one of those issues out. So those are your basic types of seats. All right? And quite frankly, there are hundreds of different designs around these types of seating assemblies. But that's our seat assembly 101. To make a long story short, the metal is good, at least in this case. A radial O-ring could be potentially problematic. And this is just a different view of that, so you can see the glass bulb, cutaway. You can see in this area the angular space. And this assembly here, in this graphic, is called a cap. The reason why I like to point this out is this is for basic identification, because the sprinklers physically look the same when we get into talking about replacing them. This cap is flat. Almost looks like what we call a recess or flush into the seating assembly of the sprinkler. Where the typical Belleville seal, you see them all over the place, has some a raised type arch cap assembly. So they're very distinct when you look at one compared to the other. Of course, if it's 60 feet up in the air, we got to go up and check out what you're dealing with. Okay, scope to this thing. I said we made quite a few of them. 35 million have been manufactured. Almost 3 to 4 years of all of the 3 brands I've mentioned of fire sprinkler manufacturers. We have to stop and do nothing else. I have to still run 2 shifts at the plant to generate this amount of sprinklers. It's everything that was out there essentially for years. All right. We got of the 35 million, almost 4 million we have overseas. What we're doing is just saying, okay, because of these test results and because of the potential issues, we just want to replace them. All right, what we're going to do is replace all of the O-ring sprinklers and give you new sprinklers for free. No cost. That's the program. I can end it right there. Of course, you probably have a couple other questions. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to provide the new sprinklers. We're also going to provide the labor to get those things put in. We have got 48, we may have 50 guys now, and what we call our responsible leadership team. And these are just people to deal with the administrative issue of going through all this. As you can imagine, it's huge. It's not just knock this thing out this weekend type of deal. And there's a whole lot of sprinklers here. So we have a whole building filled with people, most of which, we hired fresh off the street, more administrative type people to administer through this, to get through this program that I'm going to try to explain to you. Okay, what we've got, almost 50 people. We may have 50 now. It's like one of those hotlines type of things, and we have multiple different numbers, which I'll get into, before you can get a hold of based on how you're dealing with this. You could be a client, or an owner, or just a guy who has a house with these fire sprinklers, or you may be a contractor who wants to actually replace these sprinklers, or whatever. We've got these guys from 9 a.m. Eastern Time, or 6 a.m. Pacific Time, to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, or 4 p.m. Pacific Time. That's another thing. Being an East Coast-based company, we found out that a lot of people get back from lunch in California, pick up the phone and call, sorry, they're gone for the day. We're keeping long hours to make sure that we can accommodate the majority of people who are looking for information on it. One of the neat things is I've got a binder here, and I only brought two, so two of you guys can take one of these. You may already have this. Some of you, I'm sure, are fairly familiar with this program already. This binder is very, very informative. It's got tons of information and gets you started from A to Z, essentially. I mean, some guy that knows nothing at all about fire sprinklers can look at this binder and get them going on the right path. It's also a binder that's used to help assist. We've given out tons of these things to we have state fire marshals here. We've already addressed that. We did a huge telephonic conference call. We've got 2 slots in our training facilities for the Association of State Fire Marshals that are coming in. We've let tons of contractors, insurance people, we've advertised. I'll get into all these things. But I think the strongest thing we've got, besides this binder with all, you can go through all the things, is the website. The nice thing about the website is this is truly one that I've been able to get every question I've had answered. The website contains everything from how you make a claim, how you get a waiver, how you actually can help install, replace, how you get new sprinklers, how to get prioritized, that type of stuff. It's a very, very comprehensive website. Plus, it's got all your 800 numbers on there if you want to talk to a person. But if you're not aware of this is a this website is www.sprinklerreplacement.com. There's no subtlety to that. It's bare bones. It's the way to do it. Sprinklerreplacement.com. And I can get you going on that. I'm not going to try to walk you through all these things, but here's all of the different models that Central has that are affected by this program. All right, just about every single one that they made for years and years and years, because they have the odor. Doesn't mean that they all went through extensive testing and they all had higher pressures or whatever. It's because of the type of thing. It's kind of like a car company, if you have a problem with your brake pedal or something like that, just because it's one brand or whatever, you go in there and you replace the whole doggone thing if you can. We can't. And that's something we're pretty stand up tall, because we can, and we are. We're not. This is a whole new thing. Nobody is pointing a gun at us and saying you got to do this. This is one of the things we're just saying. We want to do it. What we'll do is we'll absolutely make sure that we don't have a potential problem down the road, and that could be huge. I'll show you some other ones that we're doing, just to give you an example. Some dry sprinklers. Have some of these sprinklers failed to be listed? No. They're all listed, all right? Have some of these sprinklers failed to follow the current listing guidelines? Yes, some of them have. But some of them have also passed some of the current listing guidelines. Some of you may be familiar that the listing requirements for dry sprinklers changed radically a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. All right? And so a whole lot of things that were perfectly okay based on the requirements for listing post-99 got changed. Based on the huge scope of this, and to be perfectly honest, because we can, and we can afford it, you know, i.e. get it done, get it all done, even though, you know, who cares about the warranty and all that kind of stuff, and, oh, well, you know, the standards do change, you don't want to go back and grandfather everything. Since we're going through a 35 million issue of replacement, let's go ahead and lump all these in here with it. And we've got a Star model on here that wasn't even manufactured by Star Sprinkler as you know it. Star Sprinkler, which is the Tyco company, before it was even that, was a completely different company that manufactured these. But we're going to replace every single one that's out there. Here's another one that never had a problem in the field. This is the F927. Some of you are familiar with Grinnell models. This became a gem. What the term is an on-off sprinkler. And just, you know, right, if I start a fire right here, that sprinkler operates, right? It's just a regular sprinkler. This on-off sprinkler had a special way to be able to recognize temperatures and shut a valve inside the sprinkler, right, to stop the water from coming out. It was used, a couple of manufacturers made these on-off sprinklers, and they're gone now because they either had O-rings in it, or in this case, both of these things. Even though we've had no problems out there, because it has that dynamic O-ring. That's the key. Dynamic, you know, hey, for me it's easy to talk about because we're just saying replace everything. But just so you know, dynamic means if metal has to move with water against rubber, that is dynamic. Right? And, you know, my question when I first heard it, oh, that's scripture, huh? Well, when would you ever have a case that's not that way? Well, I don't think there is. But this F927 model had lots of dynamic O-rings inside of it to make it function. So almost 200,000 of these sprinklers. Everyone ever manufactured. We're saying, let's pull them back, we'll give you another sprinkler. Lots of notice has gone out. What we've done is, have you seen this advertising TV guide? Or Sports Illustrated?
National Geographic yesterday.
National Geographic? Are we kidding around or what? we are out there. We're out. We want to make sure that people in overseas knows about it. We're advertising in their trade. We're not limited to what I call our trades or you know, our unique little industry. SFPE magazine. Let's not call that, but I've written the bills for that advertisement and I should remember. The FTC magazine, Sprinkler Age magazine. Sure, it's in there, but we also put it in other places like People magazine. And you know, my wife comes running out of the kitchen. Look at this! You know, she's doing the crossword puzzle. You know, when she gets the TV guide and you know, see your company. Look what they're doing. Oh yeah, don't worry about that. Another thing. We're about a little more than 30 days into this program. We're not going to stop it. We're going to keep it going non-stop. And all the major publications I mentioned for at least 3 months. Here's kind of what it looks like. It gets modified based on what publication. If you saw it National Geographic or wherever you may have seen it, it looks something simple. They identify the sprinkler, the potential dry sprinkler here, it's wet and dry, and they explain the process. What that is meant to do is to get people wondering, hey, you know, I wonder if these are those sprinklers. Most of us can look at these and say, no, we don't got to worry about these. But a lot of people out there don't. Right? People reading People magazine outside of our little immediate family of an industry have no clue. Oh, we have sprinklers? That's the thing. So, you know, that's the point. And then we have a number of ways to get these things replaced. what happens is you go through this notification issue and let us know, hey, I think we may have these, or I do have these. How do we go about getting this thing remedied, rectified? And we ask you to fill out some forms, just to show us, okay, here's what you got, make sure you got these types of sprinklers. Fill out a waiver form, and the waiver form is really for the chain of custody. It's kind of like evidence. You know, they call it the chain of evidence that along the way. What they don't want to do is get other people hurt because it's Central's problem. What they don't want to have is you to have a house and have somebody come in and replace it, and then, you know, a year later some guy says, hey, your sprinkler's overspaced. Let's say a fire marshal friend of yours. Right? And you say, well, doggone it, that guy who came out here and replaced those sprinklers, that's his fault that they're overspaced. Or we could potentially replace of the 35 million, 10 million of those sprinklers that are technically, not per code. Right? Has anybody here ever, familiar with the codes? And, walked to any place, a mall or an airport, and say, where in the heck did they get that idea from? Right? When we replace these sprinklers, we're going to replace the sprinklers. What we're not going to do is become the world police and just say, okay, that's illegal. One of the nice things and why we have a lot of our clients who are enjoying this program, besides being paid for it, is the ability to approach an owner and say, hey, you have a potential problem here. You're way overspaced, or you've got a wall 2 inches from the sprinkler or something like that, and maybe fix it. But in the meantime, all of these things, this replacement program deal, the website, it is all completely blessed by, of course, our council and Ann Brown, the chairwoman of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Something that, in fact, there's, I think, 4 letters from Ann in here and on the website that you can get, because what they're meant to do is direct them to the different forces out there. Contractors have concerns. Specifying engineers have concerns. Fire marshals have concerns. Right? Right now I say, okay, the whole state of Minnesota, you need to replace these things by next week. And well, there's too many of them to do that. So what Ann Brown has done is said, hey, look, these guys are taking the responsible look at this. They're going to replace them all. Please work with them in their time frame. Let me try to go over the time frame. Well, before I do that, here's one of the things that's in the program. I'm showing you one slide here. We've got a whole thick packet of identification process of every one of those sprinklers that I talked about. Not only does it have a physical description of the sprinkler, it's got an engineering drawing of the sprinkler. It's got a comprehensive deflective thing. So you can go up to this sprinkler over here and look at the thing and you can try to identify it. It doesn't have these marks on it, and it's not that sprinkler, but you can physically identify it. We also have many people in our communities who are identifying sprinklers as they go. Every time I go anywhere. I'm a Marriott guy, so I'm walking to a Marriott. Yes, I'm checking out, and by the way, you need to call this number. Who participates? Anyone in the industry, specifically the people who have the sprinklers. We are not excluding anyone. It doesn't matter what business relationships are or whatever. You got them, we'll replace them. We'll make good on them. All right? What you get is the sprinklers themselves, and you get the labor. Okay? That's our biggest issue. I talk to fire marshals a lot. I talk to engineers a lot. I talk to code reviewers and even clients. Right? It's all cool. When we get to the money part, it's very interesting. As you'll see, we'll pay for the labor. We'll pay for the sprinklers. And we'll prioritize how we do that just based on common sense. All right? I.e., you got a nursing home, let's get those things replaced right away. All right? Schools, that would have preference over, let's say, going out there and doing a warehouse for large order sprinklers that have never had even a problem in testing. Okay, we would prioritize that. Also based on when you get your claim in. You have to have a logical way to do it. We're looking at replacing anywhere from 4 to 6 million sprinklers per year. We've had about 120,000 hits on our website since mid-July when we came out with this thing. That's all getting the claim stuff and getting all this kind of stuff. So we're getting our forces in a row here. We have started replacing some, but it's kind of like, use an analogy, last week in Detroit, we're about ready for our plan of attack. We've set up all the administrative stuff, we're getting the things in here, we're sending crews out, but we're also going through a painful, well not painful, but a long drawn-out process of trying to get everybody happy. A lot of problems is we have a lot of people who, once it comes to the money part, aren't happy. And I'll get into that in a second. Okay, what we're not going to pay for, all right? Okay, let me reiterate. We'll pay for the sprinklers, we'll pay for the labor, all right? If you have sprinklers in your house, all you got to do is tell us. Fill out forms, we will replace those sprinklers. We will get someone to replace those sprinklers. We're done. But we won't pay for competitor sprinklers. Let's say you say, well, I don't want any of those I don't want a type of sprinkler. I'm not saying it has to be a central sprinkler. Say, I don't want a central sprinkler. Can you use a gem sprinkler instead? Fine. It's all available seal type sprinkler. But we're not going to pay for somebody else's stuff. Okay. We also won't pay for, let's say, just I don't want nothing to do with you. Just I'm calling, these guys, I'm going to have somebody else's stuff, and then I'll send you an invoice. Unless we have those claims filled out, you won't get any sprinklers from us, and we won't send a crew or work with somebody to go over there and replace those sprinklers. We're trying to be fair about this, but we can't just say, send us a check. Soft costs, let's say you got a Walmart store, and we're going there and replace it. We'll go in at night. We'll go in the weekends when you're shut down. Right? He says, well, no, I only want you to come in business hours from 9 to 4, and I'm going to shut this half of the store off. And you got a reimbursement for that. That's we're not going to pay for the soft costs. It's a replacement program. The term recall is thrown out a lot. Hey, we're recalling them, but it's not technically a recall. These sprinklers are still listed. They are not unlisted sprinklers. They're not recalled by anybody. You know what I mean? I mean, the Omega issue went to a full recall, where the government said, you got to replace these things, which we did. But in this case, what we're trying to do is write something that could potentially go wrong. We will pay for problems with, if we go in there and a crew, rips up a ceiling and, spills water all over, your computer or whatever like that, we'll obviously cover the consequential costs. The only thing, I don't mean to sound hard-nosed about this, we're just not going to pay for other people's stuff because we are working with the CPSC and the whole community to replace it with our stuff and provide the labor to do it. The labor. Sometimes I get some questions here. Who we've got, and we started off with a couple of concepts. We feel pretty comfortable with what we've got here. We've got what we want to see first and foremost, is the original client who installed the sprinklers. Does that make sense? Contractor ABC put those in, right? They should have the right to replace them with good sprinklers. It keeps their contact with their client intact, right? And they can identify any issues. And also there's an issue of, hey, I don't want other guys, seeing, where we have done some work or something like that. I want to make sure that it stays in proprietary too, because I installed this stuff, which is absolutely fair. The other way, let's say you can't. You're too busy, you can't get out there, or let's say you're so busy that the only way you will do the replacement sprinklers is at a very high cost. That could be potentially problematic. What we'll do is we'll pay for the labor provided it's reasonable. We also have our own crews. We have teams that can replace sprinklers so quickly, you wouldn't believe it. They've had a good 4 years now of training. And if we can't use our crews, or we can't use a local person who originally put in the sprinklers, who has a relationship with the client, we can use Simplex Grinnell, or Grinnell Fire Protection. Obviously, they're a type of company, and we kind of set the table and said, look, you know, we need to be able to replace millions of sprinklers per year. All right? It doesn't matter what's going on in the world at that time, we have to be able to do it. We can't do it all with our crews. In some cases, you have labor issues, you have union issues. So you can't bring these crews. They're not a union contractor in this area or whatever. All right, fine. We'll work with the people who are in that area. And obviously, like I've been saying, the Belleville seals will be provided by us. Remember I mentioned all those people who are working on this little issue? Well, based on now years of investigation, UL has changed the listing requirement to absolutely eliminate all O-ring sprinklers, regardless of who has them or who manufactures them. All right? It's going to take about 16 months from now. It's going to change up. All right? So you'll still have a listing for those sprinklers, but they will no longer be listed per the date that becomes appropriate. Because quite frankly, they've seen some issues with sprinklers. And we're absolutely fine with that. Obviously, we stopped making O-ring type sprinklers a while ago. Other issues, which, again, I said, I don't, you know, yeah, there's MIC and there's problems out there, and there's MIC is that corrosion in water supplies and whatever. That's being addressed by the committee. It is important to note, though, dry sprinklers now have to be tested every 10 years. Why is that? Well, they're a metallic object that's put in an extremely harsh environment. After random sampling, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of what's out there, when you put a metallic object in a very harsh environment and condition, there are potential problems. We've seen that in mass scale. So what they're doing is trying to just not have a panacea world, which I lived in that world. A lot of us do, just thinking you can take a $1.65 object and put it anywhere and think it's going to last forever. That is being looked at. I mean, they're talking about testing all sprinklers, not just quick response, at least every 20 years, if not half of that now. So lots of things, and you can see that there's a number of people working on the different changes that we've got. Here are those numbers. If you don't, go to the website, sprinklerreplacement.com. There's a customer service number. There's a sprinkler contractor or industry professional or HJ number. And of course the website will answer the majority of these questions. There's still some that are out there. We have a very, I'll put the cards on the table. We have a sticky situation where, you know, contractor A wants the replacement work, but he's competing with contractor B, right? One way or another, right? So what we're doing is evaluating and certifying contractors in every area of the United States. Non-domestic, overseas, we're just certifying contractors full out. As much as I like to travel, I can see us not putting crews on planes, you know, all over the world, like, you know, ready response team type of deal. What we're doing is just using local contractors to do this work. We don't have a field Grinnell crews or central crews that go out there, so we're just using local. Okay, I'm going to get into some code changes, but anybody got any questions on this? Sir?
As a contractor, I've got several hundred of these sprinklers sitting on my shelf. How do I get them back to me? All I've seen is the replacement labor for installing them. What about the ones that are locked?
Oh, we'll replace those one for one.
How do we do that?
Just contact your local central rep. Your salesman?
They told us we can't do that.
Sure they can. Whoever that would be crazy. We've replaced the inventory of the O-ring sprinklers from day one. There's no way we'd let you sit there on an inventory or a box that you pay big money for and say, no, we're not going to replace those. No, it's actually, you can call me the rep, and I'll make sure you get those replaced.
Actually, I have two questions. The first one is, how do you become a certified contractor?
Just call that number.
So what's the requirements? Do you know what the requirements are?
I don't know all the requirements, no. I do know that there is a process, especially when it's job to job. Certified contractor is just something who, again, I'm going to put the cards on the table. If you pay your bills on time, let's say, and you do all the stuff that normal business practices through manufacturers and contractors, there's not a problem. The last thing we want to do, and I'm glad you brought this up, but I want to make this clear. The last thing we want to do is have a program where we feel good about doing the right thing, replacing and providing it, and I know it's going to take years to do it, but the last thing we want to do, after all said and is done, is to go out of our way to irritate, upset, and segregate our own customers. Because, like it or not, our customers are truly the contractors out there. So we want to make sure that our friends are taken care of.
The other question was, and I just want you to understand this, but I've got a customer that I've had for 25 years. We've got about 10,000 heads in question. The client wants us, my company, to replace them. The question is, how do I get reimbursed? I have an issue also. I don't want my competitors going into my own clients and putting stickers on everything. That's a big issue, because, we're an end user. It's a central problem. It's not the end user's problem.
That's true, absolutely. And you would be provided, everything's above board. We're talking apples to apples here.
Is there a process, though?
You just call up and say, look, I've got a job site right here that want to do the replacement program. I'm going to go help them fill out their forms and claims so we can expedite this thing. How do I become a certified contractor for this and get this thing done?
You've been to that process so far up until the reimbursement of labor, and that's what's kind of hung up right now. There's 10,000 heads in question, there's 80 buildings.
Sure. Have you provided a bid for it?
No, I haven't done that.
Okay. That's a critical
I've
process.
talked to that number a couple times, and one person had asked, said, well, to be certified, you have to be a primary user of central product assembly. And I said, well, that's really not a fair assessment of who's certified.
Well, I would agree in a lot of cases that overall, just to replace the sprinklers, it shouldn't be a primary factor, but you would have to agree that we're obviously going to be giving first looks to the people. It's central product.
Yeah, there can't be an open checkbook. I truly understand that, but there has to be a process for the rest of us.
That's something that is out of my hands, but it is something I know is sensitive. Every time I go back to corporate, you have to inform me about, okay, how do we make this as painless as possible?
Other than those numbers, is there a person, rather than just get anybody random?
Tom McDonald.
Tom McDonald, okay.
Tom McDonald. He runs the replacement and the crews.
Okay, thank you.
From a building owner standpoint, I work for a company that has probably about 500 buildings that might have buildings.
Sure.
Those forms are very lengthy to fill out because we're looking at maybe spending somewhere in the order of $500,000 to fill out the forms. Is there any program that you're offering to help out an owner such as themselves that has money to pocket or to get a handle on how to do this?
$500,000.
To answer your question, we have to identify the heads in all our buildings. We have to fill out the forms. We have a couple of pictures. It's a major process. And when you have potentially 500 or more buildings to go through there,
I can see that, but then again, this is a voluntary replacement program. And as I've been straightforward and blunt, we're doing everything we can to identify, to replace, provide the replacement, and provide the labor. We do ask for the end user to provide some time that's one of those soft costs that we're not going to take everything. We're not, let's say you want to hire someone to come in and survey all the properties and say room 1, 2, and 3. It's not something that $1 off on one of these sprinklers costs us $35 million. So we are asking that the end users or the building owners or the clients or even the contractors who are helping us to provide that.
Do you have any advice on how to approach that type of situation?
I would work with the maintenance people and just say, look, here, we'll provide each one of them a manual, and just say, in the next month, or 2 months, or 6 months, or a year, check out a certain portion of this. And so we can get these forms filled out, and I don't have an answer on how to streamline, make it a little bit simpler. And we have to have a point for each thing we do. It covers everybody liability and all that good stuff. But it's also a chain of, like I was saying, a chain of custody or a chain of liability. There are some. Yes, sir.
Do I understand what you told Ron is that on a client, you would submit a bid back to Central, you're in a group contract, you submit a bid back to Central, and Central will evaluate that price against your own in-house group? And if you're not competitive, you will still send out your own in-house group and you won't do it?
It depends, site to site, but in some cases, yes. In some cases, yes. If you're over about $10,000 on replacing 100 heads or whatever, which we have seen.
So if you're doing work in out on the road where it's predominantly a non-union area, your non-union would become the prevailing wage then?
Oh, no,
And
no.
your forces would be doing more?
No, we absolutely are conscious of union and non-union and what have you. We're not going to put barriers up. And
Well, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that you would have, through Brunel Fire, in rural areas, you access to open shop contracts.
it's okay.
Where Ron runs a union shop, Civil 3669, he comes in, like you say, $10,000 above Brunel's going to do the work. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not if it was originally put in by a union contract. It's a union job, it's a union job. We're going to be absolutely sensitive to that. What we're not going to do is have a bidding war for every single room out there, type of thing. What we're just going to do is make it fair. If you're already a certified contractor, right, that says a lot right there. But the guys who evaluate this stuff have been on replacement teams now for over 4 years. We've seen everything from every high lift area to union areas to non-union areas to rural areas. Pretty comfortable. Don't ask me to explain how they evaluate all this stuff. But what we're also sensitive to is trying to keep the labor at a fair market for us. And I don't have all the dash T's and the dotted I's. And that's why I've kind of prefaced this whole point once we get to the money. That's where the sensitivity comes in. Sir?
Yeah, 2 questions. If I'm looking at the sprinkler with the O-ring in it and the rubber, I can look down and see the black ridge around the red.
Which particular sprinkler? If you're looking at a Belleville seal.
No, I'm talking about the O-ring.
Okay, yeah.
The flat one.
Right.
We complained about the leaks in the ones that looked like they were black rubber, and we got new ones that were brass. But there's still a flat O-ring sprinkler, the ones that are being recalled.
If they're O-ring sprinklers, then yes, they're going to be recalled.
All right, how confident are you that in this first thing that you said, there were 9 cases of dry and 4 wet that didn't operate under this limit? What if the pressure's 20 pounds? How confident are you it's going to work?
Well, based on the testing, I'm fairly confident, but since we're replacing 35 million of them, I'm also hedging my bet on that type of thing. I'm saying, look, all right, we're just getting rid of them, we're replacing them, and it's voluntary, but we want to make sure it's done. What we don't want to do, just to answer that, those ones that you're comparing, that's fair. Apples and oranges. It's similar. It's different than the old black O-rings, the red O-ring type of thing. But all O-rings we want to see come out. And that way, in 5 years or 6 years from now, okay, when we look at these things, right, and I don't mind getting up here and answering these questions, hey, it's over, it's done. And when you go to a Belleville seal, if we turn that and say, how confident am I in the Belleville seal? I'm very confident to a point where every other manufacturer has been using that well, not every other manufacturer, but, you know, the majority of manufacturers now are using the Belleville seal. So if another potential issue comes up, you know, that burns everybody.
In those cases, was anybody killed?
No. No, there was one case in the drive, with the drive sprinkler, where the clogs the pipes were clogged up. That was the Pennsylvania boarding house. We all know about the problem with that, right? We don't want to go there. But the sprinklers themselves were corroded, right? But they never had a chance to operate because they never saw any water or anything else. It was just a complete fiasco. But no, in any of those cases, nobody was killed or injured. All right, really briefly, sure.
Can you talk about the timing? If you get your claim in today, how long until these sprinklers will actually be replaced?
That's a good question. No. I mean, if I knew, I'd tell you. So let's say you've got, right now, the earlier claims that come in, the quicker it's going. Right now, our teams are out there itching to go. I would anticipate, kind of like a training class that I run, where I work. You know, when we first started going, it was like, great, you know, let's start doing this one. Now we're on a 2-year waiting list just to get people into that class. And I anticipate once we process several 100,000 claims that it's going to take a while. It can only replace 4 to 6 million a year.
What is the window? That's what I'm saying.
To be completely done?
No. To file what training you
There's unlimited. Unlimited. Right.
So maybe they're not covering it.
No, not at all.
The reason I'm asking that is the 1% of the revenue, so 1% of it.
Oh, quite a bit more than that. In fact,
What percentage?
I would say almost 70% worldwide. And some people, I mean, we'll never get all of the sprinklers, just because a lot of people don't know how to identify them, and they're put in remote areas, or the original contractors are long gone, and the original building owners are long gone. But we're going to do the best we can. I mean, and heck, these are they're faucets up there. So we'll try to get as many as we can. If they're not nuclear devices that are going to melt down or anything like that if we don't get them. The vast majority will operate no matter what. But hey, let's do it. I'd like to wrap up this replacement issue with just this one thought. We got the money to do this. All right. There's some cases where we're going to be prudent about that, save tens of millions of dollars. But we've got the money to do this. All right. And we hang our head high on that because we've got very little media attention on this particular issue. You know why? We just said we'd do it. We'll do it. We're done. And it's been very positive for us.
Just a question again, a little bit clarification. You're saying that they will be replaced by certified crews?
Yes.
You need license fitters in Minnesota?
I have no idea what's the deal in Minnesota.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. They must be licensed by the state of Minnesota.
When I say, in reference to what I'm talking about, certified crews, certified by Central to be in.
Okay, they need to be certified by the state of Minnesota.
That's fine. So we got those 50 guys in an office to deal with all the. I used to be a sprinkler estimator, designer, and every state, every city had its own particular file. Believe me, this would be trying to talk about all of them. It's impossible for me. I'm going to spend 15 minutes talking about some other things that may, we're talking about the potential issue for a little bit of buildup. Let's also talk about some changes in NFPA. And this is really kind of a wake-up call. You know, the NFPA convention was mentioned here earlier. The May show, we'll all be there. It's going to be a great thing. And we're already in the second phase of changing code or making new code. Right? There's 3 basic phases to it. There's a report on proposals, where anybody and everybody can write in a code change, and then the committees evaluate that and say yay or nay or whatever. Then there's a report on comments, where there's a report on all of those comments, and then there's finally a floor vote at the committee. For a long time, we've been kind of sitting on our hands. What I mean by that is typo, because we haven't had a better mousetrap or a way to do something. And this is not going to be a product demonstration. This is purely NFPA. All right, but this would be a typical attic type space, and years ago came up with a different type of device to protect these types of spaces, simply because standard sprinklers demonstrated in 7 fire tests that we ran back in 1994 failed to protect the roof. Now, don't worry about the CPVC or whatever. Just think of this as a branch line, a branch line, a branch line, 5 branch lines in a 60-foot wide attic space. Some of you guys have heard this from me before. I'm not going to get into all the logistics of why or whatever. But right now, per code, you're allowed to be spaced in an attic up to 130 square feet in a combustible attic, with a maximum spacing between sprinklers of 15 feet. 15 by whatever gets you 130 square feet. All right, we did a bunch of fire tests. Essentially, what happened is the sprinklers didn't operate in these areas. They couldn't operate. They never really saw the heat. I hope you can see this video. It's kind of dark. There's a fire in a sloped attic, right? If I put a sprinkler 1 foot away from that fire, it never sees the heat. 2 feet away, being knocked down with those new nozzles I talked about, the attic sprinklers. But that's a typical. This is a severe roof slope too. This is a 912 roof slope, right? Which is not that severe. It's less than a 45-degree angle, but it just doesn't control it. That's why we came up with that new type of nozzle. I've been moaning and complaining about this for some time. All right, but can you imagine that? You're allowed to have your sprinkler. You have one here. You can have it 10 feet away from that fire source and doesn't see the different types of heat. Also in these areas, they're called interstitial concealed spaces. Another little issue. As a manufacturer, we're trying to develop a special type of piping. But these areas, the thing above the ceiling here, where all the pipes run, and the lights, and all the trades all run in that area. Well, we've always said, well, in that area, you've got to protect it at the same thing, per code. Code says it's perfectly all right? 130 square feet, 15 feet spacing. We did that. We came up with a new, sir?
Before you run away from what you're doing with that attic sprinkler,
Yes.
6 years ago, Temple was trying to develop what they call the eco sprinkler.
Yes.
You use in surgery.
Yeah.
So that has a much more severe pitch in many cases. Whatever happened with that?
Nothing really. The attic sprinkler in that case, in fact, I'm leaning that way. So I'm not going to ignore your question at all. It's a good one. When we have a severe pitch, what we know is that if a sprinkler installed at let's say if it's a 2012 pitch.
Well, I know they work. That's not my point. My point is they're not listed for it.
No, not yet.
Because there has to be a base.
They're not listed because we didn't do any specific fire tests with Underwriters Laboratory or Factory Mutual.
So that program's been dropped.
No. More to come on that. Going back to the interstitial spaces, right? We know we're allowed to go 15 feet by 9 feet or 13 feet by 10 feet. That's perfectly okay, right? And we came up with a new nozzle that works in those little flat areas that I talked about. All right. But Underwriters Laboratory, I don't know if any reps out there, but you know who you are. They kept getting nervous about this new sprinkler, saying, well, it's not listed, it's not in NFPA. I want you to do more and more and more tests. We ended up doing 2 actual fire tests more than what we were contractually required to do to get a listing. After that last test, we ran a baseline test with quick response upright sprinklers. All right, per NFPA 13. All right, and we ran them on Schedule 40 steel pipe. The difference between that and this new nozzle that doesn't really matter about, but that was on the plastic pipe. But we ran baseline tests, and the one baseline test was per code. One thing to keep in mind, when we did the actual test, the quick response upright sprinkler was at 10 psi. That's 3 pounds of pressure more than you need in that area. And the spacing was at 120 square feet all the way down to 90 square feet. So in no case was the sprinkler spaced to its max. What's allowable per code? So look at the 2 fire tests. The one on the left here is with this new type of nozzle, which isn't really the issue today. This is what we have been installing for 100 years, at least. These are quick response upright sprinklers underspaced at more pressure than what's required. I know it's hard to see, but what's going on there is that is an activated sprinkler. It is flowing. It is providing all the water that is required for NFPA. And what you see here is an excellent example of unobstructed construction. Because in the wood trusses, all the heat and the gases are completely unobstructed and it's raging out of control. They had to put that fire out with a hose. They could not control it with sprinklers that were underspaced. Every single sprinkler in this test array with traditional sprinklers that a lot of us in this room have installed for years, operated, yet failed to control the fire. Why? Here is a typical umbrella pattern that all sprinklers, standard spray sprinklers, the technology that's been around from the mid-50s, require. They need time to develop. Like this sprinkler right now, this sprinkler needs to develop before its pattern, which will cover 130 square feet on the floor. So what happens when you cut off a pattern in a 9-foot ceiling like this, and you make the area of coverage this big, or this big? Does the sprinkler know to go 7'6" and that one, flat in one direction, and 7'6" flat in the other direction, and then just drop down? No, has no idea. And this is what happens. Sprinkler operates, bam, cuts off. It's got nowhere to go. Cuts off here. And another problem in this case scenario is the heat and the flames don't have time to develop either. What happens if I started a fire where I'm standing right now? It would eventually hit the roof and move in a conical, symmetrical type pattern and allow the elements to operate and absorb the heat. What's happening in a little space like this is, bam, the heat source is immediately at the ceiling. It's got nowhere to go but out. All right? And where is the sprinkler? Below the flame. Okay, well, that's no big deal, except when the sprinkler's below the flame, can everybody see the sprinkler pattern? It's a little bit better view than what I've shown on the video. Sir?
I'm kind of curious question more than anything. There's still some conventional or old-style sprinklers around some of the buildings around here. Is there a cause us to believe that they able to have one, and why don't they have one?
Applied density. Applied density was better with standard spray sprinklers, what they call spray sprinklers.
It's just in the old timber buildings where
Right.
they
Yeah, it's a good point.
sprinklers, which was to modify what he did.
Excellent point. The gentleman is talking about a phenomenon in fire sprinklers that used to be around for the first 80 years in fire protection, called conventional. And what it would do is throw its pattern about 40% of it up and hit the surface of the ceiling and 60% of it out. All right? So 40% is smashing into the ceiling and coming down, which would be fine. Provided that you space the sprinklers at like 4 feet on center.
80 square feet per head or
80 square feet, I'm not arguing with that number. That number would be pretty good, in fact. And I'll get into why. Excellent point. Here is your area of coverage when you cut off the standard spray sprinkler in a combustible conceal space. All of that is dropped. And you can see the pattern there, right? That umbrella type pattern. Everybody see that? Everybody see how much vertical discharge you're getting out of the sprinkler? Zip it. And I'm getting to a point here. Here's the new type of sprinkler. We don't need to worry about this. Here's high flat pattern, and then here's our typical umbrella pattern. If flames are above that, you're in trouble. Right? It's easy for us to look at it now, but the fire tests are over. Yet, the way we've been installing those things for years is incorrect. We also did testing with, we call solid wood joists, not wood truss this time. Wood truss means those little V's and W's and 2x4s that go by, allows air and heat and stuff to get by it. These are solid, right? And what's happening here is this upper assembly is attached to the underwriter's laboratory roof assembly that can just lift it up and down to wherever we say. In this case, we told them to drop this. These are 2x12s framed in this little piece of plywood here, staked at 16 inches on center. We dropped that whole upper assembly down to like 12 inches between spaces. Much higher consideration. Here's what NFPA allows. All you fire guys know this, right? You have a space 6 inches or greater between framing members, and that's what that is, 6 inches. You got to have fire sprinklers. Whole different animal here. Remember I talked about a good example of unobstructed construction? This would be obstructed construction. Now when the heat and flames go up there, here's a sprinkler that's 3 feet away from the ignition source. It never operated in the fire. Here's the next one. If we had a perfect NFPA concentrical uniform thing, it would spread. But what's happening is the heat and the gases are being trapped into the bays. What they call bays. It's the spaces of the framing members. All the heat gets in there and it travels the entire length of the bay, and then it starts to spill out. And that's the sprinklers actually towards the end operate the best. Now, here is looking at that upper assembly again. They lifted it up after a fire test. There's an excellent example. I mean, I teach this stuff. This is something, when you're talking about panel construction and solid wood joists and what have you, look what really happened in here. Here are those 2x12 framing members, 16 inches on center. Fire started right in there. Look at the fire spread. You only had it contained in 3 or 4 different bays, and yet it was a catastrophic fire because it's failed. Right? Now that new sprinkler, it's not the point. I'm trying to get to NFPA. What that did control that fire to this draft stop. Okay, the draft stop would be for like that lintel or the wall, right? It keeps the fire in this area. What that's supposed to do is contain that, allow the sprinkler to control it. Well, to recognize failure, what would be failure in this case? Well, failure would be burn through the upper assembly, which would be, let's say this was the floor of the unit above you. So let's say the fire where I'm standing right now and it burned through this deck, right? That would be failure. Or if it burned past the draft stop. Or, see this line right here? That's a branch line of what we call dummy or target sprinklers. It's just 3 sprinklers installed in this little alcove out here, right? And after the fire test and smoke all clears, you look at that. If any of those sprinklers operated, that would represent failure. All right? Here, it's kind of hard to see view, but you can see right where my finger is there is where that alcove started in an actual fire test being protected with standard spray sprinklers. That has completely rolled around the plywood, and it's actually beyond the alcove assembly, and here are those target sprinklers. So what would represent pass and failure? Here's looking at it from a front view. This assembly was protected by those new type of sprinklers. All right, here's the draft stop. Any damage? Any burn through? No, it's all contained. Here's the exact same view being protected with standard spray sprinklers, stuff that we've been told and are allowed to install for NFPA. You have burn through complete of the draft stops. You had 1, 2, 3 target sprinklers out of 3 operate, and you have a hole. Here's a picture from below. You have a 6-foot long hole in 2 bays, 2 joist channels. So not only did it burn up into the next unit, it burned out of that area and ignited the other sprinkler. That represents failure. Based on these things that I'm talking about, we have submitted code changes. Manipulate this a little bit. Everybody here familiar with the report on comment phase? It's a portion of NFPA that allows you to try to change the code. All right? Type of fire product submitted based on a slope ceiling, like I showed you earlier. Based on the slope ceiling, based on the testing that we had done in 1993 and 1994, we feel that sprinklers are overspaced. Now, don't want to get rid of those sprinklers, but if you do use those sprinklers, we need to do something about it. So what we suggested was that with combustible concealed space with members 3 feet or less on center, use the slope, that the maximum protection area should be 64 square feet or 8 feet on center. Sure, someone said 80 square feet before. Pretty much that's a little bit more than what we're proposing. The NFPA committee, I happen to be on the sub-task group that was dealing with this. They went bananas, especially when you evaluate how many more sprinklers you have to put in, providing that they're standard spray sprinklers. And they rejected this proposal, even though it was submitted with test data. But the reason why they rejected this, because it's not over with, folks, the reason why is the committee agrees with the submitter there exists a possible problem, blah, blah, blah. What is your reasoning for going at 8 feet? And quite frankly, they're like, well, that'd be better than 15 feet. That's my reason, right? Well, you got to show me substantial proof. So what they said is, the committee has formed a task to fully investigate this issue and to report back to the committee as to proposed protection strategies within these spaces. Blah, 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 blah. Essentially, they said, look, let's not shelve this. We can't. We have data showing that it doesn't work. Let's look at this independently, right? And evaluate. So they put together a research council coalition to kind of evaluate that, right? And, you know, we thought, well, it'd be great if they could get some of these fire tests done prior to the report on comments. So this is a report on proposals. It's an outright rejected proposal saying that, but we should do some fire tests, which was kind of cool, which I'll get to in just 1 second. I promise I only got no more than 5 minutes. The second code proposal, and we submitted almost 40 proposals, and it's got everything from storage to high-rises to whatever. This is just these combustible issues I'm talking about. Another typo thing. Combustible concealed spaces used in the interstitial spaces shall be listed for such use. Remember where I showed you the fire completely overwhelmed that area? Remember I showed you how the target sprinklers all activated and it burned through that? The committee has accepted it. So for the interstitial spaces, based on the test result, and you know, essentially once it gets voted in the May NFPA, this is going to be part of code. This is an accepted thing. Simply, we have to do things different than how we have been looking at it. Now, ironically, Underwriters Laboratory, working with this coalition to evaluate the slope issue that was rejected, have done a full service test. And the pre-published edition of the test, I was at 2 of them. I've got a copy of that, and I'm going to show you based on the reluctance to accept a proposal without independent fire test analysis. I completely understand because quite frankly that 8 feet that we picked out, that's just an educated guess. We've now done a series of fire tests now. We've got 6 more tests that were done last month, essentially. Here's one of the tests. They're all like this. Okay, remember I showed you the slope of the roof on the other fire test? It was a 912. This is the minimum. This is a 412 roof. Protected with standard spray sprinklers, spaced at less than 120 square feet. Look at the fire involvement. Look at the damage. I'd say there's a bit of burn proof. Because of, well, personnel on the committee really don't want this to happen. They want to think that regular sprinklers are going to protect it. This fire was protected with standard spray sprinklers at 120 square feet, quick response with 20 psi. You'd only need 7 psi the way we're doing it now. At 20 PSI, we have burned through 4 full 2-foot bays. Total turn. So remember that rejected comment? This testing now, this test here, spacing was at 8 feet. They did testing at 12 feet, 10 feet, and 8 feet between sprinklers. Best we can do at 8. Provided the fire starts at the peak. If you start a fire at the peak area or underneath the peak, you have a sprinkler up there, that sprinkler's going to probably perform very well because that's a standard spray perfect pattern. But whenever you get it in this type of area, like we've demonstrated before, you can see some big issues. Tons and tons of different things going on in the industry, not just all replacement and what have you. But I thought I would share both of those things, that yeah, the possibility of some sediment or buildup in some of these O-rings, which is the possibility of an issue, yeah, we're going to replace 35 million. But I just wanted to share with how many millions of sprinklers we got in that scenario, and the interstitial space scenario, and everything like that. Those aren't going to be taken out ever.
Were any of the rails favored?
No. No, they're 8 by 8, 8 by 10, and 10 by 10.
A lot of the old systems were installed at 64 square feet.
That's an excellent point, and it makes sense. Except what we're seeing is we can start a line of fire directly underneath the branch line. And per our deflector distance right now, it doesn't even matter. Once the sprinkler operates, the fire's still going around it. It's throwing all of its water down. Right? What kind of a pattern do we get out of that standard spray sprinkler? Umbrella cone pattern that's discharging completely away from the fire source. But I've heard the staggering issue a few times. I mean, that's fine. I think we're at a point now where the testing agencies, I mean, this is the 11th test that Tyco has dealt with in proving their point. I think it's now time to prove that these sprinklers can be used in these areas. And we're not even talking grass systems, other problems out there and what have you. A lot of issues, a lot of things we need to do. The great thing about the standard that we use, NFPA 13 specifically in my business, is that it is a constantly evolving code, and it's not trying to confuse you every 2 years or 3 years when they come out with a new standard. They're fixing their known problems. You know, I mean, we've made a lot of changes in the last few years, and nobody's ever done testing like this. I think everyone in the industry just presumed at some point we built every type of structure with every type of slope or obstruction, and well, how else can we get those rules? Right? Obstruction rules? You know there's 12 guys in white lab coats up there, right, putting different, deflector pans and things like that. Nope. The vast majority of our obstruction issues is based on 1 or 2 baseline tests from 2 ends of the spectrum and interpolating everything between and using common sense and logic. And what we're finding now is that, well, you know the type of stuff and a lot of the other different manufacturers now. You're hearing that term specific application for everything, because we are truly testing stuff. But what we can't do is, just like we can't sit on a possibility of a problem with the sprinkler and we've got to replace those, we can't sit on information that we know is proven to be problematic. Any questions about a few different things? All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Let me go on.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Very informing and interesting. One last thing before you go. I put a bunch of papers and brochures and so forth with regard to SFP over on the table over there. There's membership applications and other information about publications that they put out. There's a salary survey that they do periodically. There's some of those over there. There's a brochure on careers of fire protection. take a look over there. I also brought a copy of the NFPA program from last year, their annual, that I always got a bunch of my pen marks in it, but if anybody's interested in what the NFPA convention is really about, you're welcome to look at this. Jim gave us a good start on some of the process at NFPA, and I've sat in some of the recording sessions that they have where they actually vote at the convention on these standards, and it's quite interesting to listen to. You get some of them are fairly sedate, where people get up and they give their opinions, and then they vote and it goes on, but there's others where they're just screaming at each other. It's really entertaining. I guess the main thing is I encourage all of you to go to the NFPA convention. There's the exposition, which is a lot of vendors and consultants and the NFPA and SFPE, people that make everything from fire hose to sprinkler heads to fire talk. I mean, all that stuff is laid out and presented, and it's a great way to get up on the latest technology that's out there and see what's going on. And then, of course, the major part of the convention is all the programs that are put on by industry experts, and there's a variety of those as well to suit anybody's interest. So I encourage you to sign up and I guess get your hotel reservations in early. With that, thanks for coming. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Tim.
I think that one thing for those of you who just finished our burning, annual burning class out of our goals, and I want to thank everybody who participated here. We raised over $56,000 in the children at the burn house. So thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll sign off. Thank you.